Welcome everybody from Asia and around the world to session 4 of our Vertex Technopreneur Webinar Series. My name is Mathias and I am a managing partner at Vertex Ventures. Today's topic is on scaling up and cross-border expansion. I'm sure many of the startup founders in this audience aspire to build large businesses that span multiple countries. Being multinational not only gives you a bigger market to go after, it also de-risks your business from any negative macro events in a particular country. However, as you might expect, scaling outside your home market comes with challenges. You need to pick the right time to do it and not expand before you are ready. You have to pick the right geography to expand into. You have to pick the right leaders in the new geography who can fit in with a core team. And of course, you need to know when to pull back if things are not working out. So I am absolutely delighted today that we have two great panelists who have been through this journey of building global businesses and will be sharing their experiences with us. So I'd like to welcome Jeffrey Tiong, founder and CEO of PatSnap, and Vinod Muthukrishnan, founder and former CEO of CloudCherry, and now Chief Growth Officer at Cisco's Contact Center Business Unit. We at Vertex are proud to have led the Series A at both companies and have had the privilege of working closely with both Jeffrey and Vinod in their journeys as they scale their businesses. I will let each of them introduce themselves in a minute, but first, a few housekeeping items. You should know that this session is being recorded. Also, we have a QA panel at the bottom. If you have specific questions, feel free to type them in the panel, and we will try our best to get as many questions as possible. And finally, we would love to get your feedback, so please complete the post-event survey that will be sent to you. Let me, at this point, turn it over to Jeffrey to introduce himself and give you a little context on his company. And by the way, we will have a couple of polls that will pop up over the discussion, so please take a few seconds to answer the poll. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking this time to join this session, and thanks Vertex for the invitation as well. So let me share a bit about PetSnap. If you can go to the next slide. So PetSnap is an connected innovation intelligence platform. What we do essentially, we provide intelligence analytics to our customer around the world, mainly corporate customer, their R&D department, and their intellectual property department to help them identify risks and opportunities. So we will tell our customer everything they need to know about a company's technology and innovation, be it their competitors' technology or their supplier partner, or even themselves. We have many customers who don't even have a full overview of their own technology capabilities as well. So that in a nutshell, what we do. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So we now have about 8,000 plus customers globally across the globe, about 800 employees as well in China, in North America, in London, in Singapore and Japan, and about 9 offices worldwide. And our customer cut across all different industry segment and different size as well. Mainly those who invest a lot in R&D investment. Those are our potential customer. In terms of industry, there will be life science, healthcare, semiconductor, advanced manufacturing, automotive industry as well, now going through a lot of huge innovation transformation as well. Next slide. And that is some of our past couple years of historical context. So we raised our Series A from Vertex, and really thank you the Vertex team, Keylog, Chuhok, who believed in me many years ago. In fact, I share with Keylog and Chuhok that I started Vertex when I started PetSnap. I'm still alone, single, and then now I have 3 kids, a family. I think Vertex has really grown with us, PetSnap, and with myself as well. And 2015, we raised our Series B in Summit from Summit Partners. And 16 and 18, we raised our Series C and D from Sequoia China and Shenwei Capital as well. So that is kind of our milestone. Yes, that will be my part for PetSnap introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for that introduction. And we do have the results of the first poll. It looks like 62% of the companies in this audience are planning to scale their business to overseas market. 22% say no, and 16% are maybe. Let me now turn it over to Vinod. Vinod, maybe can you give a brief introduction on CloudCherry and on yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. So CloudCherry does something that probably concerns all of us. So if you look at what we do, it's a fair assumption to make that good customer experiences yield better business outcomes. So if your customers are happy, they tend to stay with you longer, buy more from you, and so on and so forth. But the steel threading of that is not always very scientific. It's one thing to make that assumption. It's quite another to be able to show that with data. It's quite another, to be honest, to be able to show that predictively, wherein you have a sense of what you can do to your business today to make an impact on your business outcomes like repeat repurchase rate or NPS or customer churn predictively and proactively. And the way we went about this was to be honest, in a very human way, replicate how a customer experiences a brand as a journey. And we felt that if we were able to replicate the journey that a customer had with the brand, to capture, measure the experience that the customer had at each touch point, which obviously could be web, mobile, online, at the contact center, so on and so forth. And we understood at each touch point, what was the delta between good and bad experiences and how they impacted the customer's propensity to come back and do more business with you. We'd be able to give the brand a real pulse of the customer or voice of the customer. So that's really what we did. Now, as a company, again, much like PatSnap, we started in 2014 in Chennai, India. You can go to the next slide, please. And it's a fairly brief journey before we got acquired, of course. It's only 5.5 years. But the interesting part was we started in Chennai, moved our office to Bangalore. I moved to the US early 2017, set up headquarters in Salt Lake City, a city I'd never been in before we set up offices there. And instantly at the same time, probably our best sales person moved to Singapore, because when Vertex invested in us, we actually had never thought of Southeast Asia as a market, but thanks to Vertex, we actually moved somebody there, and we'll talk a little later about what that yielded. And along the way, raised $17 million of venture capital. Cisco was one of our investors, and we got acquired by Cisco in 2019. So it was a five-odd-year journey, fairly eventful, as we'll share a little later. But just coming to our customer traction, we can go to the next slide. In this time, we worked with around 100 mid-market and enterprise customers. Funny enough, we started in SMB and moved to mid-market enterprise later across 9 countries, predominantly in the US and Asia. But I think the big learning for us was partnering with uber large companies to raise money from and partner with for go-to-market with Cisco or Microsoft or Salesforce. Those, I believe, were the big learning opportunities for the team at CloudCherry. And we'll share some of that as we go along. But that's really all I have from my end. Ben, back to you.
Thank you, Vinod, for that brief introduction. So let's move straight to the questions. And I'd like to pose the first question to Jeffrey. So Jeffrey, and before that, actually, here are the results of the poll. It looks like the biggest consideration for expanding to new markets is availability of local contacts to support networking and navigation, which is actually a very good topic. I think both of you would love to hear your thoughts on this later on. The second biggest concern people have is government and regulatory factors, which I think, Jeffrey, you probably will be able to speak very effectively on this topic. So let me jump to the first question. Jeffrey, in your introduction, you mentioned that you were started in 2005, and in less than 3 years, you moved to China. So what drove that decision? Why China? Why so soon? And what was the preparation you had to do in order to make this move possible?
Yes. So just to share some context, we started, I had the idea in 2005 when I was in US doing an internship, and then officially started PetSnap in 2007 in Singapore, right after graduated from NUS. And then in 2008, we went to China, decided to expand it to China. In 2012, we expanded to London, to Europe. And in 2000, around 16, 17, we set up office in North America, in LA and in Toronto. So that is kind of our expansion. And I would say out of this few expansion, I would say around 50% are conscious decision. Another 50% is kind of a serendipity. So going to China, that is kind of a more conscious decision. So back then in 2007, 2008, started in Singapore. First of all, back then the VC environment is not as robust as today. So we couldn't raise any money to develop our product. Secondly, also the market that we're going after, where customer have a lot of R&D investment. Back then, we also thought that either US or China will be a bigger market eventually. So coupling the cost consideration and the eventual potential market size, I decided to take a chance to go to China. I think looking back, going to China is one of the most key important decision for us. That is a key inflection point for PetSnap. And now PetSnap, we have about 500 people across China. I think that is in terms of cost and addressable market, that is kind of the key decision factor. And secondly, also, I think one of the question mentioned, the poll mentioned about local context networking. I think that is also key. So back then I have a Chinese partner who also worked with me together. Because of him, actually, I would say also give me a big consideration factor why move to China back then in 2008. And in 2012, we decided to go set up office in London as well. That is also mainly because I met a partner in a conference, and he came from London, and then and we decided to do something together as well. And that's why we also have an operation in London. So looking back, I will summarize the local market context, the cost, the eventual market size, and one of the key point is I know someone from that market. I think that will be the key consideration why PetSnap choose this few market to expand to. Yep.
That's great. And there's a question on the panel to you, Jeffrey. How did you meet the China partner when you expanded there?
Yes, that's why look back, all these expansion decision, or even include in business, I will say, yes, we all, or my own entrepreneurship journey, yes, we work hard, work diligently, but there are definitely a component of luck, serendipity. So my 4 founding team member, all of us came from different countries: Germany, London, China. And I met my China partner through another mutual contact, where we all actually went to the same entrepreneurship program in NUS, called NUS Overseas College. So that was how we meet each other. And this partner of mine actually also wanted to go back to China because he also saw that China is a big market. That is kind of serendipity as well, how we meet each other.
That's great, thank you. So let me now turn it over to Vinod. Vinod, I remember when your entire Bangalore office fit into a single room when I first met you. But soon after that, you chose to expand, as you mentioned earlier, simultaneously to Singapore and to USA. Why did you choose those 2 countries? And was it necessary to move at that point in your journey? You're a very small startup.
No, I'm glad you asked. So obviously we got marquee brands in India very early in our journey, and which was phenomenal, right? In terms of load testing the product, giving us validation. But as we looked at ARPUs in India at that point in time, the price points at which customer experience software was being sold, we quickly did the math and realized that if we really had to win and own the customer experience market, we had to win probably the most mature and large CX market in the world, which really was the United States. So going to the United States was fairly obvious. That said, it was a very crowded market. But we looked at the market and we knew that everyone was focused on the top tier Fortune 500 enter the market. It was a very expensive market. And a lot of the mid-market that was discovering customer experience actually didn't have a cost-effective yet high-quality solution. So the US was a fairly slam-dunk decision. Funny enough, very recently, as recently as last week, we closed a huge deal in India. And India ARPUs are where we would want them to be in 2014, but that's a different story. Singapore was interesting. I don't think I had enough exposure. Though in my previous startup, I had sold in Singapore, I still didn't believe I had the requisite exposure to expand there. And to be honest, our single driver decision to move to Singapore and send probably our best sales person there was the fact that Vertex was an investor. And our first set of investors, all the marquee iconic Singaporean brands were acquired actually by first party introduction from Vertex. So I definitely went to you, Juhok and Kilok. I have great gratitude too, because you did introduce them to us. And that's really the driving force behind why we chose the markets we chose to expand to.
You actually prompted my follow-up question to you, Vinod. I was going to ask you how you went about building your network in these two countries. You already answered the question on Singapore. It was Vertex that built up your network. But in the US, for somebody like you, I don't even know if you traveled to the US before. How did you go get established and build a network and build a circle around you?
So the joke obviously was when I moved to the US, I obviously moved to the West Coast, and I moved with one suitcase, which was 22 kilos, just confirming with the baggage limit. And I had a cricket kit because I knew there was a huge Indian diaspora there and people play cricket. That's about all we knew. And we had one mid-market customer in the US. I had been to the US before, but that was when I was in the merchant navy. So when my ships used to go to the US, which was fairly useless for this pursuit. And the next was when I sold for my previous startup, but that was in financial services in a totally different part of the house. So definitely zero network. I 100% struggled with my first set of networks, but a couple of things worked for me. One, obviously, Cisco was an investor. And I said, if nothing else, I have a go-to-market partner and a product integration partner, I should go there. We had a bit of a go-to-market going with Microsoft, wherein we are a tier 1 ISV in their startup program. And funny enough, in Singapore and in the US, we did leverage that to get access to the market. But I'm happy to dive into more depth. But we had to build our entire brand and presence and demand gen organically from the ground up. There was no network to leverage. There were no people we knew, and there was no local partner who really took us into market. We had to build that organically. And happy to, as next step, kind of jump a little deeper into that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that topic in a few minutes. I'd like to go back to Jeffrey for the next question. Jeffrey, let's talk about some of the challenges you faced. I mean, looking back, are there things you would have done differently if you had to do it again as you expanded to China and then you went to other countries? What are some of the mistakes you made that you would correct the next time around?
Yeah. I make a lot of mistakes. Last few years I just make some painful mistake, and I jokingly internally I say I make a $10 million mistake, the most expensive MBA lesson. So, but I think one of it being people is all about the people and team. Okay, when it comes to I think I'm more engineer mindset. When I first started PetSnap, my kind of assumption was build a great product and the business will run itself. But actually, after all this year in the business, I find that it's all about the people. Only when you have the right people, right team, right values, right culture, great leadership, then we have great product and other things else. So people is key. And some of the key mistake lesson I learned is especially when organization grow to a different stage, different size. For example, I think when we were 20-30 people, I can easily grab everyone, go have a lunch or dinner together, and I can easily just share my vision, share and talk to each other. But when it comes to 100 people, this cannot be done. And when it comes to 500 people globally, we have to manage differently. And for PetSnap in around 2018-19, the last 2 years, we went through the stage where we also need to hire in more professional manager, because the founding team, the 4 of us, we all are, this is the first job. first-time entrepreneur and we are very inexperienced. And that's why we want to bring in more experienced professional manager kind of to help us to manage the organization. And I think that transition is really tricky because at one hand, yes, these experienced professional manager who are maybe in their late 30s, 40s, or even in the 50s, they have experience in how to manage a larger function, larger organization. But at the same time, their values, their culture, their skill set may not be the best fit with a fast-growing environment where a lot of times we still need to be hands-on ourselves. A lot of these people come from big organizations, like I hire from Microsoft, Dell, SAP. Eventually, all didn't work out because a lot of them, they never went through that stage of hyper growth. That sometimes at this minute, you need to be at 50,000 foot view, think strategically. At the next minute, you need to go down to 50 foot view, roll up your sleeve and actually solve the problem. They actually lack of that kind of skill set. And that make them not so effective in our type of environment, which is still a bit chaotic, a bit fast growth. So that is one part of it. And the second part as well, this professional manager, they come with their baggage. They have their own way of culture and values. And with PetSnap existing values, our founding team, our culture may not necessarily the best fit. And to find that fit is so key. It doesn't mean they are a wrong value. It's just when the values is not the best fit, there are a lot of unnecessary friction. Our communication cost is much higher. It's much harder to build trust. So that this whole transition, but we still need experienced people. So this whole transition, I think I learned a lot over the last 2 to 3 years from where we are a much smaller organization to where we are today. Yeah.
So how do you make that trade-off, getting experienced people from, you mentioned Microsoft and companies like that, versus more startup-oriented people?
Yeah.
And when you're interviewing somebody, what's your thought process?
Yes. So after I make a lot of, the last 2 years I make at least 4 or 5 wrong key hire. My own experience, at least from my own experience, is I still need experienced people. But one thing that I'm looking for now, especially those who report to me, is a must requirement. They must have entrepreneurial experience prior to that. Either they started a company before, or they must have some entrepreneurial activities before they join a large organization. That would be the most ideal, because those who actually started some entrepreneurial project activity, started business, is just different. Their mindset, their attitude is just different from someone who never started a business, has been from day one in a big business. That kind of attitude and mindset is just different. Secondly, I find that it also still make a big difference. They may not started a business, but their close family member, their parents, their husband, wife, spouses started their own business. That also make a big difference because they have that empathy for people who start the business. I think that is key. Of course, there are others I will talk to them on their life, what we call lifeline, is their life value, how they grew up, their family value, to try to find a good fit. It's still not easy, but so far these are some of the key things I'll be looking for. Yeah.
That's great advice, Jeffrey. Thank you. So Vinod, let me ask the same question to you. I know since I was very much a part of the journey, there were a lot of challenges you faced. Maybe you could talk about some of them, and in hindsight, how would you have done things differently?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, if I can give you 2 answers, right? What I did and how I would ideally do it. And those 2 answers are almost exactly the opposite of each other. So from my perspective, as I looked at, I always knew that when you change your market, your product market fit also changes, right? So, product market fit has 2 elements to it, product and market. But we often underestimate just how much that moves. Now, if you're selling an online SMB, a self-serve kind of a product, maybe the trends are more secular. But in enterprise, it's very different because your competitive environment is different, price points are different, requirements are different, your customer maturity is different. So when we look at cross-border movement, we oftentimes go out and say, let's hire a salesperson in that new market. And now I can almost with great conviction tell you that hiring just a VP of sales directly in a new market as your step one is probably the biggest mistake you can make, because I genuinely believe now that marketing precedes sales. No rub on the sales folks. Unless you've truly figured out your customer profile, your right messaging, right positioning, the marketing channels that are right to reach out to the audience you want, sales can't kick in. Sales can't generate demand, marketing does. So really my big learning, I did multiple things. I started with setting up a sales team first and said, okay, India marketing can make up for that. That was not the right thought. I should have put a lot of emphasis on branding, positioning, messaging, and marketing first. The MarTech stack, which I'm very proud of, that we set up in 2018, we should have been setting up in early 2017. That definitely we set up far too late. Also, I believe like I set up a team because the team was local and I'm empowered. I did delegate sales too early. And I'm of the firm conviction that the right time to step away from sales for a founder is never. I think you can delegate, you can make yourself less sort of central to the sale process. But I believe at early stages, you should probably just be closing your first $1 million of ARR yourself with your own hands before others even start to kind of come in. Also, a lot of people talk about the model wherein you have SDRs who are offshore, you have sales teams which are local. But I also realized that that works for businesses which are really easy to put in a band or that kind of a bucket. Ours was a very consultative sale. We were selling you a customer experience program and a software that powered that program. So the conversation that I need to have with you to take you through that journey, to tell you that you need to do this and sell you a software that builds that program for you is very different from me telling you that, look, do you want X product? I'm the cheapest. This is my value prop. These are my 3 features that you like. Buy my product, put your credit card in. So if you have a fairly transactional sale, we put a lot of science into breaking down the funnel into MQLs and SQLs and sales accepted leads. And I realized that a lot of the science was actually counterproductive because it came in the way very early on of the same person being able to see why you listen to my messaging, why you choose to give me a second meeting, why you go through my demo, and why you ultimately buy. So hyper specialization and segmenting your team as you read in 1 million blogs seems like a really good idea. But till you don't have this insane amount of product market fit, splitting up your teams actually siloizes knowledge, no matter how many interlocks you do. So that's the other thing that I do differently. I know we'll capture all of this. I have a long list of things I would like kind of give as learnings, but definitely some of these things that I did were suboptimal. But in that, some things actually worked. We literally went to Singapore only because Vertex was there, and that actually worked out pretty well for us because multiple things kicked in. We got our early customers through Vertex. One of our biggest Indian customers, an exec, moved to Singapore, and he kind of took us to Singapore and Southeast Asia, and he said, I want to take you here. We had a couple of market research partners who got us customers there, which was incredible. And our Microsoft go-to-market really kicked in, and we were a tier 1 ISP in Singapore. So many things came together to make Southeast Asia work, but we moved with little more than, hey, Vertex is an investor, we'll probably get some introductions. I'll definitely put more science into my cross-border moves if I were to do that again.
Actually, as a follow-up to that, there's a question from Mingyu in the audience. How do you build, and this is really for both of you, how do you build your sales organization across geographies, given that there's a difference in cultures and sophistication of customers? A US customer has a very different level of sophistication compared to a customer in India or in other parts of the world. And also then an LTV to CAC profile could be very different in different regions. So how do you, number one, build a global sales organization, maintain common culture, and maintain consistent metrics? Either one of you can go first.
I can start, okay, I can start. So we try to over standardize and over engineer our process up front, which actually was a mistake. I believe in optimal state, you'll have a lot of engineering, right? A lot of telemetry, but when you get into a market, instead of thinking about what the optimal structure of SDRs and sales and this and that is, I would actually spend the first 6 to 12 months figuring out in very fundamental and almost non-quantitative ways, why do people buy? What is it where is it that the value lies? Because what happens is we go into a market and we say, let's outsource our SDR function. If we get 10 SDRs and they give us 10 leads a month and we do the math, we build this beautiful funnel. But what we forget is, what is that SDR going to say, to whom, and for what reason? So the first thing that really I would do is put a lot of focus on learning subjectively what the market wants. And as you understand broad themes, then start putting science into it. So one thing we did, for example, was even though we set up a team in the US, it was actually an inside sales team. We realized that for the mid-market and upwards, we still wanted to do the inside sales route, but we didn't want the inside sales reps to be out of India, right? Something that worked for SMB and mid-market, we didn't believe will work for mid-market and enterprise. So we did the same inside sales model, but the team was actually in the US, and in the US, it was not in San Francisco. That was in Salt Lake City, right? So when you look at building teams, to be honest, for each new market, as unorthodox as this sounds, once you've subjectively learned what the market wants, you can put a lot of science behind it and engineer your sales funnel. If many of the requirements are common, if you're going after, let's say, all English-speaking countries, then you can easily standardize an SDR function that sits in your home base. If it's India, you can definitely do that. If it's Southeast Asia, you can definitely do that and build a global demand gen org. The further up the value chain you move in enterprise, the closer to the market your sales org has to be. Funny enough, now if you have to sell even $100 million deal, you're probably doing it virtually, right? So the great test now is post-COVID, will customers be happy to buy even enterprise software at very large numbers virtually? My half a guess is yes. So some of the lessons we have probably learned in the last 5 years are obsolete because the world has fundamentally changed. But in general, for SMB, obviously, you have to have a completely virtual sales process. As you go to the mid-market, your inside sales leans into the process a little more. In enterprise, you drift closer and closer to field sales and closer to the market in which you need to do. I will turn it over to Jeffrey here, because when you go to markets which speak different languages and are not as homogeneous as, let's say, something like Australia, UK, and the US, right? In some ways, and I'm sure you have to do many things very differently, but those lessons, Jeffrey, I think you've learned way better than me.
Yeah, thanks. I actually agree all what Vinod say. Maybe just to add, in terms of how we build our sales team, I divided into the what we call East and West. Internally, how PetSnap look at the business. West will include North America, Europe, Australia. All these will be kind of the West, and East is Asia, like China. Mainly for us is China, and then Japan and Southeast Asia. This we have two kind of sales architecture for these two regions. Just to share for the West and in general, I think it applies to China as well. The type of sales force we deploy, from my experiences, depends on your ACV, your annualized contract value. So for anything less than, I would say 100K, 50K USD a year, I think same with Vinod, we deploy inside sales team. We have a SDR to cold call to find the leads, and then an AE, account exec, to close a deal over online, over Zoom, do a web demo and close a transaction. Those that is with less than 50 to 100K a year. Those that more than 100K, usually we have another team called name account that is a combination of a bit of inside sales, but also on-site visits. Because for this kind of deal ticket size, customers still prefer to see you, to see the actual, have actual on the ground training services. So that will be the different sales force will be deployed as well. And then even larger one, 500,000 and above, those will be the enterprise team. So I think the product, the ACV product of the product, it kind of determine which go-to market is better for that. And in our west side of it, mostly are inside sales until today, even though we sell up to, I think recently we start having a few 100K deal. Those also build on our inside sales team and we upsell them. For in the East is different. In the East, it's still, especially I will use maybe China, and I think so far our experience in Japan and Southeast Asia kind of similar as well. People still prefer to meet, even if you are a 20K deal or 30K deal, people still want to meet. But we still do use SDR to do lead generation. Once our SDR team identify this is a customer with budget, with requirement, the right decision maker, then our team, our sales team will go to meet our customer and build a relationship and all this. So that is, and for Asia, just to add an additional context is even China, Japan, or even Southeast Asia to some extent, that is what we hear a lot, that Guanxi is still key, that local context and relationship. Even within China, we divided our territory to north, east, south. In Beijing region, Shanghai region, and Shenzhen, Guangzhou region, also very different, the customer. And you really have to know them, get to know the local circle, and build relationship with them. Japan also, Japan. And Japan, you need Japanese. And even we look all Asian, we all, for us, we cannot survive in Japan. Our salesperson in Japan is true blue Japanese to do business with our Japanese client. So that's kind of my experience. Yeah.
It's interesting, you both mentioned the need to have people on the ground, particularly for enterprise sales, and to have personal meetings. There's a question from Randy Chi here in the audience. How are you both looking at expansion in the current global business environment? And has your expansion plans and your sales methodology changed post-COVID?
Yeah, maybe I will take this first, Vinod. Yes, for us, I think PetSnap, we are very, very fortunate that actually COVID-19 didn't really impact us much. In fact, during the first half of the year, our business still continued to grow. I think mainly because the customer segment we serve, they are the R&D customer who invest in R&D. And when they look at R&D, it's within 3-year, 5-year time frame. It's not within the next 6 months. They have to invest in long term. And plus, because of COVID-19, a lot of business even need to innovate more. They need to even adapt their business model to the new environment. So that I think is a very fortunate for us, for our context. In terms of how we look at expansion pre and post COVID-19, definitely COVID-19 make traveling much harder, much harder. Now in even my personal travel, I came to China now 3 months ago almost. When I first came to China, I have to quarantine in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And it's just, I can't easily travel nowadays. That's why even including all our colleagues, my London and Toronto colleagues has been working from home since end of March until today, and somehow it works as well. So we are actually transitioning to 80% work from anywhere as well moving forward. So they also, I would say, it present risk and opportunity as well. And for us, how we look at expansion is still the same, because we use inside sales. We will through inside sales, we can reach to different market, different region. And from there, we still will continue to do business in different country. And based on the growth and the market, addressable market of that country, then we decide to whether to localize. For example, in London, our London team cover the whole of Europe, but we know, but through London team, we already have quite a few customers in Germany, and in Germany is quite localized. For example, a few of our big German customers, because of GDPR, they require the server, everything, our AWS need to be hosted in Germany as well, and also need a local Germany entity, etc., etc. So I think this is just multiple factors come together that the next one for us, we will expand in Germany, but there's all these factors come together. Not sure if I answer the question, but it's many factors come together.
That's good. There are a couple of other questions that's come out of that, which I'll ask later. But maybe, Vinod, do you want to go next on that, on the COVID topic?
Yeah, so I have the benefit of, obviously the CloudCherry team continues to sell, but I also run now the growth and go-to-market at Cisco. So I have a small company and a big company perspective. Obviously the world has changed perhaps irreversibly. The good news is we also make WebEx. So the move to virtual has happened pretty fast. I don't believe things will go back to the past wherein every meeting was a flight. I think people really start putting a premium on what they fly for and what they don't. So when COVID hit, for the first 3, maybe even 6 months, things did slow down. But what's happening in the customer care context in the world is there's a rapid acceleration to the cloud. Even large enterprises that didn't believe they needed to go on cloud suddenly realized that the world changes so fast. I need the speed and the agility and the flexibility and the ability to take my data to the homes of my employees and agents. And cloud is the default choice. I heard a data point from an analyst which said all 2022 cloud goals are happening in 2021, right? So that's how rapid that acceleration has been for large enterprises. That said, we are seeing an increase of local regulations coming in. Every country is working on some version of GDPR, right? Which means even though you say cloud, when you look at multi-tenancy, you're looking at local compliance. You mentioned, Jeffrey, you mentioned Germany, right? Large enterprise customers, if they're in Canada, banking and financial services, your cloud has to be in Canada, right? So even when you think cloud and multi-tenant and you think that infra is a solved problem, you come back and realize that infra is not a solved problem, right? You need to look at localization, local storage, local hosting, and things like that, even though you're in the same cloud. So we are definitely looking at massive tailwinds to growth. It's definitely a great time to grow. The business is doing well, and there's obviously a lot of investment in inside sales. But more importantly, they're really mature, really experienced field reps who've never seen the inside sales world are now having to kind of reskill themselves, because a lot of the sales skills that worked in the physical world don't tend to work in the digital world, which by the way includes how you train, monitor, assess your sales teams. Field teams were trained and monitored and assessed very differently from inside sales teams, which had much more data, much more telemetry. So you'll start seeing a lot more of that science being applied, and technology rather, being applied even to field sales teams, because everyone's in inside sales as of this date, and that trend is likely to stay for a long time.
That's great, great. So I'd like to switch tracks a little bit here. We've talked a lot about sales and go-to-market. Now let's talk about customers. There's a question from Kush in the audience, Kush Agarwal. How exhaustive was dealing with clients from multiple geographies that had different regulations, and how did you overcome that hurdle? And then once the product is ready, is it really advisable to enter 2 to 3 markets at the same time, particularly when it comes to deploying the product? Either one of you can go first.
I can start. So we actually built the first few versions of the product wherein we didn't need PII, right? So the reason I mentioned that single thing is if you are somebody who handles PII or not, it's literally a fork in the road. If you handle PII and you have all of the compliances that come with that, I would not recommend entering more than one market at a time, because there is just so much compliance that is market specific that needs to be done. And the penalty for failing on PII could potentially kill your company. So when we started growing, we looked at anonymized aggregated data. So, and we built a very unique model wherein even though everything happened in the cloud, I'll give you a small example. We were in Singapore, our cloud was in Singapore, we had to go to Malaysia. And obviously Malaysian financial services institutions have regulations around the cloud being there. We were on Microsoft Azure. Now Azure didn't have a Malaysian cloud. So we actually built a hybrid version wherein we deployed a very, very small sort of a layer on the client premises locally. And that is where the data resides, and only tokenized, anonymized information came to our Singapore cloud, right? All the processing happened there. And when someone accessed their product from Malaysia, they saw the data. So we actually didn't get the PI into our servers. We managed to comply with and serve Malaysian customers, including someone like Petronas, even though our cloud was in Singapore, purely because our architecture was such. So we had to make a fair amount of engineering sort of innovation to make compliance happen. But if PI is integral to your business, binary answer, don't do multiple markets at a time. Get compliance right, because the cost of failing there can potentially be fatal to your company. If it's really around GTM and scale, I would pick markets where my trends are secular, wherein I know the same things work. It could be language, it could be the same competition. Because if you have, let's say, 2 other big global competitors and they're present in those markets, then you know what messaging is hitting those customers, what price points things are being sold to them at, and your competitive advantage or differentiation can be carried into that market. But if that's not the case, you want to think long and hard before expanding market to market. Jeffrey, over to you.
Yeah, this is also many things, many factors as well. For us, for example, especially now with the US-China trade war, a lot of data security sensitivity is definitely being brought up as well. But from day one, for us, PetSnap, we deploy our product to different regions. China, we have our own AWS center. US, we have one. Germany, we have one. So because each country already have their own data regulation, I think this is definitely one key. And this definitely also increase our cost of serving a lot. But I don't think we can avoid it, and I think this will be the trend as well. In terms of our product localization, I think that is also key. So in each region, we have our product managers as well that really understand the local customer requirement better, and all these fit to our engineering team, product head as well, to kind of have to make the decision to prioritize which product feature we will have to do first based on that market overall potential, the urgency of it. But yeah, developing a product and deploy in different region is more and more, I would say, more and more tricky, definitely nowadays, due to all the geopolitical sensitivity. Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm going to go to a question from the audience, which actually I had the same question from Dennis Kim. How do you manage company culture in different countries, particularly when it comes to salary differences? So I think, as we all know, people in India may be paid a much lower salary than the equivalent person in the US or in Singapore, and the same thing could hold true in China and other parts of the world. How do each of you address that in your organizations? And as an addition to that question is different cultures, there may be different ways of speaking, of interacting. Have there been situations that have been uncomfortable that you've had to deal with in your organizations?
Yeah. Maybe I will take this as first as well. Yeah, it's hard, especially I would say, at least for my own experience, East West, or even between in the West, European in general, and North American is also very, very different. Even between the Brits and the Germans and the France, it's very different. So Chinese is very different as well. I think the culture, the local context, you definitely have to spend time. I think fortunately enough, I think for me and for most of us who grew up in Southeast Asia, I think we have a confluence of different cultural kind of input. Like I grew up in a very Chinese family, but watch American show and movie, and then but in a British Commonwealth country. So kind of like a mix. When I look back how I can survive in all these different countries. Like in China, for example, when you talk to your colleagues or meet with the government official, you need to know the 5,000 year of history, like how the war is fight back then, what does it mean, like to our context, what is Chairman Mao central team. You have to understand all this to talk to them. In UK, I talk to my colleagues on football, like, oh, MU, like, oh, it's a very different culture. But underlying it, the I think it's still human being. And when I look back, yes, the superficial, the kind of a surface level is different, but underneath it is still human being. I think we all still, be it from different culture, context, people still, I think this is a phrase from Ray Dalio, one of the hedge fund founder, Bridgewater. Say, in end of the day, people in life want meaningful work and meaningful relationship. I think people want to have meaningful work, being respected, that what they do, their work have actual impact, have teamwork and environment that you can build good relationship with each other. I think end of the day, it still all boils down to that. It's just that in different country, different region, this is manifested or being presented in different way. That is my own experience.
Vinod, some experiences of yours?
So, I mean, I think Jeffrey made some very good points. So I'll add on top of it. So at one point in time, I was sitting with my US team. I was in the US. I built the team in India, and I realized two very, very well-meaning sets of people were not working as well as I would want it. So I remember we planned an offsite wherein everyone from the US team, from Singapore, from Malaysia came to India, and we spent a week together, right? And it was such an incredible, and it cost a bit of money, but when that trip got over, everyone, once they understood who the human being on the other side of the email or the chat was, and truly understood perspectives, I found that people managed to work the cultural differences much better. There's never a point in time wherein you'll match cultures wherein everyone looks, acts, feels the same way. That's never going to happen. What you're trying to standardize and homogenize is how you interact with each other. a culture of ownership, a culture of respect, right? A culture of accountability. And those things I think are consistent, whether you're Chinese or American or Indian, it doesn't matter, right? Those are easy things to do. So I actually did that one thing. I spoke to a founder recently who said once a year, they actually take the entire team and work from an offsite location for a week or a month. That actually really, really helps. You'd be amazed how much taking your team outside of an office environment and working and bonding and sharing makes a difference to alignment of culture. But the underlying message I want to give is we can't force everyone to become the same, but we can get people to start speaking a common language. And that really is what you call the cultural pillars of the company. If everyone understands the same things, it's so much easier despite differences. It's perfectly fine for people to do different. And the last thing I want to say is maintaining good culture starts after you've hired the right people. When you're hiring, if you get caught up with he or she is from this big company, or in the last company they closed so much business, or this one is famous, and you hire and you don't have a filter for culture, then it doesn't matter what your team's culture is, because that person's culture is bad. So unless you are the kind of founder or the kind of team that is putting a massive premium on the quality of human beings you're hiring in terms of culture, in terms of teamwork and play, you are more likely to fail than succeed. What you do after these people come into the company almost doesn't matter. So that's my input to that.
Great insights, both of you on that point. There's a question here from the audience from Ada Lim on partnerships. So as you expand into new countries, I think both of you alluded to partnerships. But so the question here is, how did you incentivize your partners to help you grow? And secondly, how did you protect your IP to ensure that your partners didn't steal your IP?
Okay, I'll just take a quick shot at this because I had something to say. I know we have 6 minutes or something left. One of the things that I have learned is, this is a hypothesis a lot of founders tend to follow, which is, hey, I'm here. I found a partner who messaged me from Brazil. I'm never going to go to Brazil, and looks like this partner has a lot of local network. So it's a good idea. And he or she is not asking for a retainer, and they will get a rev share, right? It seems like a really good idea, right? Because you're not spending any money. And if business comes, it'll be awesome. What you're spending instead is actually your time and effort. And for an early stage startup, which I assume a lot of you are, the biggest asset you have is your time and your focus. If the founder is spending 1 hour a week on reviewing something with that Brazilian partner who doesn't get you, who's opportunistic, you probably lost 1/50th of your company's time, effort, and energy. So when we very early, unless you've figured out how to generate primary demand, and I'd love to hear Jeffrey's thoughts on this, please don't go for a partner. Because a partner works very well in an environment where product has pull, where product has genuine natural demand. Partners don't create pull, right? If you expect them to go to a market, create your brand, create top of the funnel, do closures, create happy, high net retention customers, you're smoking a pipe dream. So I would strongly suggest that the right question really is, what's the right time to get a partner? Get a partner when you know what primary demand looks like. Just getting partners in multiple countries, then we talk about incentive, you'll give more money or more whatever. 9 times out of 10, it's going to fail. But Jeffrey, I'd love to hear from you how you thought of it.
Yes, totally agree, Vinod. And I will extend it further, not just partner, including any other, not just channel partnership, but any other people, including even like a lot of them that say, oh, come, government officials say, come, we give you this and that policy. But end of the day, all this that they want, until you actually make money yourself, you know the formula, you cannot expect someone else make money for you. I think that is just not realistic. So I'm like totally agree with what Vinod said. Yeah.
And on that extension of that, Jeffrey, there's a question from Greg Tan. How do you decide whether to enter new? I'm sure you must be getting a lot of requests from overseas to bring your solution over to this country and that country. How do you take that decision, and so that you don't scale too fast or scale too slowly?
Was that for Jeffrey?
For Jeffrey.
Scale too fast or scale too slowly? I would say definitely PetSnap make the mistake of scale too fast, and we pay our price. I think the most key thing is I think there are many factors: the addressable market, and the local regulatory. I think we all have touched upon today. But if I look back, the most important thing is still the people, my team. If yes, it can be this is a very new market, regulatory, everything not ready, but we do have instances that if we send someone who truly PetSnap values, is very entrepreneur, very hungry, he or she can also still make the market work somehow. Of course, provided we also can support this person to set up a business there. So I think many factors come into play, but still whether we have the right people to do that job for me, if it boils down to that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we've got 2 minutes left. I'd like maybe 30 seconds from each of you on advice to founders, just anything you've not talked about earlier.
I'll do a speed run.
Maybe make it 1 minute.
Think of new market, please think marketing, brand, positioning before sales. Otherwise, you've just gotten it exactly the other way around. Founder sells the first set of business, even if you're doing it in a market where you don't speak the local language. Even if someone's translating that for you, you own selling your first set of deals, because you have to understand, and Jeffrey said it best when he said, unless you've learned how to make money, nobody else can help you make money. So, and which really means any shortcut, which is a partner in a market who says, I know the president all the way to every business, get you easy business, just those things just never work, right? And the last thought really from my perspective is, the formula comes after the learning, which means, funny enough, the subjective learning comes before the objective one. So don't read a book and construct this perfect funnel with 20 SDRs, 5 account execs, 2 SCs. You know what I'm saying? Like you create this and you forget what they're supposed to say, what words work, you know, what value prop works, and then you've just committed to millions of dollars of expense, but you don't know the formula inside. So that's really my snap 1 minute. And last, sorry, one more. Please take your culture with you. I kid you not, like I had a review with my team recently, and some of whom were leaving after the acquisition. And they said, 5 years ago, we had no idea why you kept saying culture. And they say now the first thing we look in a company we want to join, they said, is culture. And to me, that was the greatest testament to how much that meant for the really good people. Jeff, over to you.
Yes, I will say 200% agree. 200%. Like to go into a new market or anything, or set up a new department, want to launch a new product, first just understand it yourself. Just really have to experience it yourself. When talking about a new geography market, just go there, spend some time. Without the local context, at least for me, I cannot make decision. Yes, someone may say I know who and who, or this market should be sell this way. They are like this, you know, customer behave like this. But it's just very hard to make that decision to say if this is viable or not. And secondly, totally agree. Yeah, culture and value. This is the biggest lesson I learned, culture and value, because that is the best. Yes, you can set up a lot of SOP, process, rules, but end of the day, human being, the best thing to align with you, you know deep down when you are sleeping, a different time zone, and this person working for you in a foreign land, foreign country, foreign language, the only thing you can trust and you can rely on is this person and you share the same value, and therefore they will make the interest make decision in the best interest for you and the company and everyone. Yeah.
I'd like to thank both of you for a very, very insightful session. Just a reminder to our audience, we will have our next session 5 on September 11th at 4 p.m. Singapore time. This will be moderated by Kilok Chua, Chief Executive Officer of Vertex Holdings, and we'll have Prajit Nanu, co-founder and CEO of Niam, and Roshni Matani Chung, founder and CEO of the Asian Parent. We hope to see as many of you as possible there. And as always, please take some time to fill up the feedback form. We'd love to hear back from you on how this session went. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Vinod and Jeffrey, and look forward to seeing you all in a few days.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you.